It's not just Joe Biden that'll need to face up to the challenge of an increasingly hostile China. Australia is already in the thick of a diplomatic standoff with the regime in Beijing, particularly drawing its ire by leading the call for an investigation into the origins of COVID-19, and a potential Chinese cover-up.
I think Australia is taking a position of leadership across the Indo-Pacific and globally, and I, for one, am extremely grateful for it. Australia has been a leader in recognizing, hey, this isn't just a U.S. China problem. This is a free world Chinese Communist Party problem, and if we work together and if we enlist others in the cause of strengthening our democracies, of strengthening our free market economic systems, that's a net good for the world, and Australia is right at the center of that effort.
What do you think China's dream relationship with Australia would be?
It would be a servile relationship. It would be a relationship of dependence, one in which your leaders and your people would be afraid to criticize China lest they suffer the consequences. This is what they try to do, around the world, and we see them. We see that what they've done with certain countries across the Indo-Pacific.
I mean, it sounds almost like modern-day imperialism. They want every country answerable back to the mainland.
It is modern-day imperialism, and it's a new form of colonialism because China is driven by the party's fear of losing its exclusive grip on power, and this is why we see the Chinese Communist Party almost in a race to perfect this Orwellian, technologically enabled surveillance police state internally. This is why we see over 1.5 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, and Xi Jinping boasting that he's going to put additions on those concentration camps and put even more people into them.
In the last couple of years, 60 Minutes has extensively covered China's spreading tentacles of influence in the Pacific. Many critics label their aid programs to developing countries debt trap diplomacy, effectively providing infrastructure in return for support on foreign policy. McMaster warns China's slow creep into the region is a major cause for concern.
It's really easy to come in with the duffel bags full of cash if you're a Chinese Communist Party official and buy off a number of people in a small island state. Australia has been a very strong voice in helping countries resist the coercive power of the Chinese Communist Party.
Is China's modus operandi to basically get countries dependent on them economically, and then they've got them over a barrel when it comes to any other negotiations?
Thomas, exactly what they do is they co-opt us, and then once you're in, right, once you're profiting from the relationship, they use that coercive power against you. And then they conceal these aggressive actions just as normal business practices. Look at the economic coercion aimed at Australia.
Australia has been strong-armed by China, playing politics with export industries, including lobsters and barley. McMaster controversially says while it's a bitter pill to swallow for now, Australian producers need to start looking for other countries to trade with and reduce the dependency on Chinese cash.
What would you say to those industries here in Australia that perhaps want us to just not rock the boat too much?
I think it's an issue of education, of educating the Australian people, the American people, everyone about the threat to them and the threat to their children and grandchildren if the Chinese Communist Party succeeds. I think the long-term approach, though, is diversification of exports in such a way that we can confront the party without fearing this kind of retribution.
H.R. McMaster has now written Battlegrounds, detailing the world he encountered during his time in the White House. And just as the winds of change are now sweeping through the Oval Office, so too is the landscape changing when it comes to world powers, and Australia is stuck right in the middle of it all.
If you were co-opted to Australia to be our new National Security Advisor, what would your advice to Scott Morrison be for the coming years?
I think Australia, I have nothing to say but keep doing what Australia's been doing, and I think really shown backbone in connection with resisting the party's coercive power. And I think the more countries that do that, their collective voices will be stronger, and it will be much more difficult for the Chinese Communist Party to intimidate them.